Welcome back to No Dumb Questions. We have a very special episode for you today. This is the Insurify podcast where we give you straight talk on coverage, claims, and savings. And I'm Sara.
And I'm Julia. And this is the season 1 finale.
Yay!
Somehow we are here. I don't know how this happened. But anyways, today's question and what we're going to cover to wrap this up is how does where you live affect your car insurance and why is car insurance so expensive?
Yes, if you've listened to our last episode, you know that location, even down to your zip code, affects your insurance.
Yes. And we've got a really special guest today to talk about this topic, the author of Insurify's new auto report, Matt Brannon.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So Matt is a senior economic analyst and insurance correspondent here at Insurify. He's been a journalist for over 10 years and specializes in personal finance, so he knows what he's talking about. And he's also one of our favorite coworkers, but don't tell him.
Without a doubt, yeah. So whether you live here in Massachusetts or you're in Texas or California or Florida, Matt's going to be able to explain what's going on with the insurance world and what you can expect in 2026.
All right, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
All right, Matt, welcome to No Dumb Questions.
Welcome.
You ready?
I'm ready to get into it.
We're psyched to have you. Okay.
All right. So, Matt, what happened with car insurance in 2025?
Great starting question. I would say it feels like car insurance rates only ever go up. In fact, I feel like most drivers probably assume that's the case and that once their rates go up, it'll stay like that forever. But insurers don't really look at it that way. Insurers are constantly balancing the risk that they face through payouts and the rates that they charge their consumers. So 2025 was very exemplary of that in terms of the trends we saw. There was a big shift, basically, broadly. Insurers went from being in recovery mode to going into growth mode. So for a few years recently, you might have noticed your car insurance rates going up a lot. They actually jumped up 46% nationally.
Wow.
From 2022 to 2024, which is not normal. It's not something we typically expect to happen, but because of a lot of the things following the pandemic, it was sort of a perfect storm for car insurance rates. So things started ballooning. Inflation caused higher prices for parts. There were fewer people working, so there were fewer people to make car repairs. Labor costs were up. We also had supply chain problems, slowing things down even more and driving up costs. And then to cap it all off, during the pandemic, so few people were driving that people who were on the road started to sort of fall into riskier driving patterns and riskier behaviors. And then once people started returning to the road, those patterns didn't disappear. They continued, and all of a sudden people had more dangerous driving habits. And all of these factors combined to make the roads riskier for both drivers and for insurers financially. And as a result, they had to raise their rates very high over those recent years. But 2025 is finally starting to show a little bit of let up on that front. So we have some good news. At a time when affordability is a top concern, car insurance rates actually dipped 6% last year.
Amazing.
According to a new analysis we did. So, you know, there are some reasons behind that. Like I mentioned, companies are more into growth mode now. And also they're sort of competing against each other for customers now.
Okay.
They want to cut their rates so that they can win new customers, that they can get your policy. So insurers are doing more competition right now, and the real winners of that are consumers at the moment.
That's great news.
That's such a relief. Oh my gosh. Yeah, really glad to hear it.
Are rates expected to increase or decrease in 2026?
So looking ahead, we just put out this report on how rates will change nationally and in each state in 2026 based on the latest projections. We have some forecasts, some loss figures, and we put that together and we come up with a projection of how things might change in each state. Nationally, we're probably just going to see about a 1% increase. Things will probably stay the same nationally. We don't expect too many big changes. Now, obviously, car insurance is so personalized. It's so specific. So your location will matter a lot. But nationally, we expect things to be pretty stable. But some states may see higher rates, especially one interesting trend we can talk a little bit more about later, too, is this affordability gap we're noticing where expensive states for car insurance last year went up a lot, while cheaper states for car insurance went down a lot. So not everybody is seeing the same trends. It depends a lot on the location, but 2026 overall broadly should be pretty okay. Now, one wild card we have to talk about is tariffs, because tariffs affect repair costs.
Yes.
So if you get into a fender bender and you need to repair your bumper and your car maker sources that bumper from another country, that piece is now tariffed, and that cost works its way through to insurers and consumers.
Yep.
So far, insurers have been able to absorb these tariff costs and not pass them on to consumers, but insurance companies have flagged in filings and statements that, that could change going forward. It's very unpredictable right now. So it is something to watch out for, but that is one wild card. And then, of course, one other wild card is severe weather, which, 2025 wasn't as crazy of a year as 2024 was in terms of big catastrophic events like hurricanes.
Yeah.
Early in 2025, we had those wildfires too. So later in the year, things got a little bit better. And that is one factor that would definitely influence rates in 2026, depending on what happens.
Okay. All right. So considering the pretty expected low increase, what are we looking at for rates right now and then projected by the end of the year?
Yeah, sure. So right now, the average driver for full coverage insurance pays about $2,144 a year. And we expect that by the end of the year, that cost will probably be about $2,158. So a $14 increase over 12 months. About $1 a month. And of course, that's a broad national figure, but
sure.
Really the environment supports that. Rates have been pretty flat. In 2025, actually, companies filed for roughly the same amount of increases as they did for decreases. And that's after a year 2024 in which the ratio is 3 or 4 to 1. So we expect 2026 to be a relatively moderate, calm year for insurance, depending on, the factors that we know of today.
Yeah. Good news.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be hearing this right now. Yeah. This is fabulous. So, as you've been talking about, though, location matters. Location really matters. These national numbers aren't necessarily what every driver is going to see in their home state or their neighborhood even. So can you walk us a little bit through what that looks like? So what is the most expensive state and what's behind that? And what are some of the other states at the top of that list?
Absolutely. So I hope your listeners, when this podcast come out, will have some time to take a look at this auto report because it's got a lot of cool visuals that sort of make it very easy to follow along with this information. And just, you can get in 1 second a glance at how rates look across the country. And so if you look at our story, you'll see a big US map here, and Washington, not technically a state, but we analyzed 49 states in Washington, D.C. Alaska doesn't have quite as many drivers to create numbers for this report, but Washington, D.C. is the most expensive area of those for car insurance, with average annual cost of about $4,000 a year. So nearly double the national average.
Wow.
So as I mentioned, things definitely matter a lot depending on your location. Just in the last year, Washington's rates went up 18%, Washington, D.C. So it definitely is a place where insurers are feeling like there's a lot of risk that they have to compensate for. Washington has high rates of uninsured drivers. It's very urbanized, and urbanized states tend to have higher insurance rates because when you have more people living closely together, there's more traffic density, more accidents, and also expensive accidents that could lead to medical coverage issues and lawsuits. So DC is definitely the most expensive place for car insurance this year.
Okay.
And right behind it is, not surprising, one of its neighbors, Maryland, also at about $3,600 a year. Really, that Northeast area is if you look at the map, you can really see, and broadly, the cost of living is higher there. Yeah. There's a high concentration of people there. Anybody who's lived in that area can tell you what a nightmare driving over there is.
So true.
We can.
Exactly. So all of those things are working against some of these areas in the Northeast. And then some other places also are not exactly in the Northeast, but Michigan, for example. Michigan saw its rates go up 12%. On average, they now pay about $3,000 a year for car insurance. So it depends where you live, but these changes are definitely something we'll be keeping an eye on.
Yeah. And also, I think Matt's been speaking to this, but think about Michigan, there's a whole state, and then there's Detroit, right? Your rates in Detroit, if you live in Detroit, might be different than if you live in a different area of the state. So we're talking at the state level, it can go down even further. But Matt, you've kind of been talking already about some of the factors behind what influences car insurance costs and what would make car insurance expensive. But can you talk to us a little bit about anything else you're seeing there and that widening affordability gap that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, sure. So there are some pretty common denominators, I guess, across some of the states that we're seeing increases in. Also, when you mentioned cities, stolen cars are also something that have been in the news a lot recently,
Mm-mm.
and they also affect your car insurance rates. So those tend to happen more often in cities. We also put out a report recently on the states with the most stolen vehicles. And one factor that is sort of leading to this decline broadly is that the number of stolen vehicles has been going down over the last year or two
Okay.
as car makers have added more security features. So that's one factor that's helping out. But car theft also definitely plays a role in your insurance rates. Rate of uninsured drivers. Severe weather is a big one.
Hmm.
So severe weather, we often think of it in terms of home insurance, flooding, a fire affecting your home, but
Yeah.
for auto insurance, it's very important too. Comprehensive auto insurance would kick in if you have a flood insurance claim. This happened to me. I live in Florida. In
Mm.
2024, my car flooded. And because I had comprehensive coverage, luckily I was able to use it. But you also have to think about that insurer is now paying total loss claims on thousands and thousands of vehicles. Estimates suggest more than 300,000 vehicles
Wow.
were affected by 2024 hurricanes in the US. So severe weather is playing a big factor. And don't think you're out of the woods, even if you live in maybe a plain state or something like that, like a
Hmm.
Nebraska or a South Dakota, because one trend we're seeing over there is increasing hail, larger hailstones and more frequent hail. So those hailstones drop down and they dent your roof. They factor in towards comprehensive claims and they drive up your rates. So dangerous driving is another one, increases in fatal crashes.
Hmm.
Fortunately, nationally, they've been going down lately. And another interesting factor is lawsuits. So the number of, I guess, what would be deemed frivolous lawsuits can very much affect your insurance rates. Florida passed some pretty comprehensive legislation around trying to address problems with lawsuits, and they have seen some rates fall nationally since then. So there are a lot of different factors that influence these trends nationally, and of course, on a per person basis, your driving history, your
Yeah.
location, all of those things.
Thank you. That was some great info. Can you say more about that widening affordability gap, though?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, we're seeing this interesting trend, especially over the last year, where the most expensive states for car insurance are becoming more expensive to insure, and generally cheaper car insurance states are becoming cheaper to insure. So, it's very much a tale of two car insurance markets right now, depending
Mm.
on what state you live in. It'll be worth watching to see if this trend continues, but it certainly has been very pronounced over the last year. For example, in our report, which I hope your listeners will take a look at, you can see charts that illustrate this, where, for example, on one line, you have Washington, D.C., and you can see its rates increasing significantly from, around $2,000 a couple of years ago to now $4,000.
Hmm.
Whereas at the same time, you can see a state like Wyoming, where its rates were around $1,500 and now it's about $1,000. So Wyoming is a very low risk state for insurers generally. It doesn't have a lot of congestion. It doesn't have a high rate of uninsured drivers. So drivers there benefit a lot. And it will be sort of interesting to see over the next year if this and the next couple years
Yeah.
how this gap changes and evolves and whether things really get tight in certain states and whether insurers respond to that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, thank you for talking us through all of those things. So I know it might be hard to say like definitively what like car is more expensive to insure than another, but do you have any insights to share on like what vehicles are the most expensive or cheapest, or just kind of what factors would go into something like that?
Yeah. So we did look at this as part of our new report. We looked
Hmm.
at 50 top models that we often compare internally, and you can see some real trends developing there, especially by car makers. So we looked at 7 or 8 car makers, very popular car makers you would have heard of: Ford, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, those types of car makers. And
Hmm.
we wanted to see, are their most popular models getting more or less expensive to insure in the last year. And of the 7 or 8 that we looked at, all except for one were showing an average decrease
Mm.
in cost. So that lined up with the national trend, which
Cool.
made sense. But the one outlier, which was pretty interesting, was Tesla. So
Hmm.
Tesla, which was also in the news in 2025 for
Mm.
increased rates of vandalism, of the car makers we looked at, was the only one to show an increase. And there are some, we can't say for sure whether the vandalism was exactly what would have led to that.
Sure.
Teslas are on average more expensive to insure than other vehicles. On average, electric vehicles are more expensive to insure for other vehicles because the repairs cost more. And the same is true with Tesla. Teslas are more expensive to insure than the average electric vehicle. So repair accessibility matters a lot. And that is one of the factors that is probably leading to Tesla drivers facing higher insurance rates at the end of 2025.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the electric vehicles are, pretty expensive to insure, unfortunately.
And generally newer,
and
right?
Newer and expensive to fix, expensive parts. So, yeah. Okay, so some good news, but there's definitely still ways to save. So, Matt, do you have any advice for our listeners on how they can save on their premiums?
Sure. Now is a great time to take advantage of this relatively lower rate environment among insurers because they're all competing for new business, or at least many of them are. So you should give them the opportunity to bid for your policy and go check and see if you can find a lower rate. In fact, we did a survey recently where more than 50% of drivers said that they believe they probably could get a lower rate, but they just haven't checked. So
so check.
Yeah. So check. Put your own finances in your hands and do yourself a favor there.
Exactly.
I would also, in addition to comparing, you should ask for discounts. Look into different discounts. You can call your insurance company and talk to an agent and ask if there's any you might be missing out on. Bundling, different ones for safety features, telematics programs, those devices that you put in your car and track your driving behavior and can reward you for safer driving. Even things like paperless billing, that would be what I would consider a layup for lowering your car insurance bills. So that's one thing to look into. And then lastly, broadly, if you are already pretty happy with your insurance policy and your discounts, I would say drive defensively and drive less if you can. Driving defensively is very important because a reckless driving history is going to be the worst factor of your car insurance. If you have a bad driving history, you're going to have expensive car insurance. Driving less makes you not only less likely to get in an accident because you're spending less time on the road, but some insurers will actually have built-in discounts for once you drive under a certain mileage a year. They will reward that because they understand that you are less risky to insure because you are spending less time on the road. So those are all big, important things to consider. And remember that insurance pricing is personal. It will depend heavily based on your individual situation. But one thing everybody can do is check and try to find a cheaper rate. And by doing so, they're also helping lower rates for other people because once you secure that lower rate, now companies have to adjust to keep up with them. So
that's such a good point.
That's a great point.
Yeah. I also just want to call out something that you said, Matt, about kind of taking your finances into your own hands. That's like so much what this podcast is about to myself and to Sara. So thanks for calling that out.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Matt, for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. This was some great insights.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'm sure the phones are blowing up.
All right, so some really optimistic news. So hopefully we have the reprieve that we've all desperately been waiting for.
That would be lovely. So yes, overall, as we heard from Matt, rates shouldn't increase by that much, but expensive states disproportionately experience increases versus cheaper states.
Yeah. So whether you live in an expensive state or a cheap state, it's still worth shopping for discounts and, comparing quotes, driving safe, like Matt said, to keep your rates down or potentially find a lower rate because they want your rate.
Absolutely. They want your business, like you said. Yeah. It's also worth considering the car make and model before you buy it if you're thinking about buying a car and maybe deciding if a telematics program is right for you.
Exactly. So if you're interested in reading the full auto insurance report, which we highly recommend you do, it's got some amazing graphics and it's really easy to understand. That will be linked in the description.
Yes. And truly check out those sparkly graphics because if you're just a skimmer, you'll get a lot of info. Seriously, if you're just checking out those graphics. So anyways, a big, big thank you to Matt for joining us today. If you found this helpful, share with a friend and be sure to subscribe.
All right, we'll be back soon for season 2 of No Dumb Questions. In the meantime, drive safe and save money.
You are listening to No Dumb Questions, an Insurify podcast. This content does not constitute personalized financial or legal advice. This podcast is written, edited, produced, and recorded by Sarah Getman, Julia Taliesin, Riley Hines, and Sydney Harrell. Compare insurance quotes by clicking the link below.